Welcome back to Inside the Trenches. We're going to talk about Tony Romo. So Tony Romo was actually released by the Cowboys today, and he was free to sign anywhere he wanted, and to a little bit of a surprise to many of us, that place happened to be CBS. Tony Romo has retired. He said he's 99% sure he will stay retired and will not play again this year, even though there was apparently one AFC general manager said they're 100% sure Tony Romo will play football this year. But he did post a picture online of him wearing a jacket with the CBS logo on it. He is supposedly taking over Phil Simms' role on Thursday Night Football as an analyst. What are your thoughts on the Tony Romo retirement?
I think it's a good idea for Tony Romo, just because of all the injuries he's had over his career. And, I mean, it just makes sense that when you get older, you're more prone to get hurt. So I feel like this is a good idea for him, just preserving his body. Luckily, he hasn't ever really had any major head injuries, so that's a good thing. So I think he's trying to avoid that, trying to avoid other injuries, and I think it's a good idea for him.
I definitely was a fan of the idea for Tony. Seeing a guy who's gone through so many injuries in his career, and I also think has been extremely underappreciated throughout his career, I definitely like the idea of him stepping away from the game, but he's not stepping away from it completely. He's going to be arguably more popular now. His face is going to be on TV maybe even more often. And he gets to do something that he's really good at, which is analyzing the game. I think he's a really smart player. I heard some stories about when he was on the sidelines this last year, and he's like basically picking apart the defense in his mind and thinking, why did Dak do this? I mean, granted, he's a rookie, but he's sitting there basically seeing the mistakes Dak Prescott was making on the field and thinking through them himself, and then relaying that to Dak. So watching him do that on TV, talking to the audience, could be really fun. I think, he has the personality for TV. He has the looks for TV. I think he's going to be great in this new role as a part of the CBS broadcast team.
Yeah, I agree. And I did see, though, NFL, I'm not really sure who it was, but there was a quote. Actually, I don't think they gave who said it, but basically they said, if your team loses your starting quarterback, look for Tony Romo to be signed.
That would be interesting.
It would be interesting. And, I mean, personally, I don't really see it happening. I don't see him going back.
I don't think he does either.
But I think if any position, if that makes sense, like the quarterback position is one of the easier positions to get back into football after you haven't played for a while. So it's possible, but I don't think so because, again, he's gone through so many injuries and he's just trying to protect his body, so I don't think he's really ever going to play.
I also can't imagine Tony Romo basically doing his color commentary or whatever his role is going to be for CBS on a Thursday night. Dak Prescott goes down on a Sunday, and then next Sunday he puts the headset down and grabs a helmet and goes playing. I think it'd be weird. I'm sure if he's doing this with CBS, there's probably going to be something in his contract saying, you can't just leave in the middle of the year to go start playing football again. I think if he's really doing this, he's doing it at least for this entire year. I don't think he's going to leave in the middle of the year to go start playing football again. Apparently there was a quote out there from Tony Romo himself saying that the only way he would play again is if the Cowboys desperately needed him for some weird situation. So my opinion of it was, I think, one, he does want to preserve his body. Two, he had said that the money was really, really good from CBS, and apparently he was considering the Texans. That was an idea he did like, but the money from CBS was too much to pass up. And then three, I wonder if he just didn't want to play anywhere other than Dallas. I'm wondering if that's where his heart really lies. Maybe he's really loyal to Jerry Jones, and he seems like a pretty smart business guy, and he understands the Dak Prescott thing. Younger, more athletic, cheaper, new face of the franchise, had success right away. It's not like you can't fault the organization for starting a guy when you got hurt. I think he understands the situation, and I don't think he's bitter about it at all. I think Tony Romo's a pretty smart guy, but I also think his heart lies with the Cowboys, and I just don't think he wanted to play anywhere else.
So he's done now, and
I guess.
And
for now,
that means for teams like Texans, Broncos, teams like that, who the media had said we're interested in Tony Romo. What exactly does that do for those teams?
I'm glad you asked. I think The one that I'm looking at the most, that I'm most interested in, is the Texans. I think the Broncos are fine. The Broncos have their options. They had options last year. They almost made it to the playoffs with those options. They drafted a quarterback in the first round last year. I don't think the Broncos are really that upset about this situation at all. Honestly, I don't even know if Tony Romo was a free agent, they'd even talk to him at this point. I think the Broncos are set with their quarterback situation. The two that really stick out to me, you have the Jets, and then you have the Texans. The Texans stand out to me more because they made the playoffs, but then they traded that quarterback that I guess led them there away. He didn't really lead them there, but he was there for the ride. I think they're the more interesting option to me. And what I'm guessing they do, there's a big-name quarterback still on the free agency market, and I think that's where they're going to go. If I had to guess, I think that Jay Cutler goes to the Texans. And then I also think they pair that up with a first or second round quarterback pick as well. I think they're going to double down at quarterback. They're not going to give too much money to Cutler. I think they learned their lesson with this last contract, and I think they're going to try and hedge that bet with the early quarterback selection as well to try and not make this mistake again.
That is why I think Cutler does not go to the Texans.
Really?
I think Cutler will want too much money, and I don't think, like you said, the Texans are going to want to pay him that much money because of what happened with Brock Osweiler. So I think Jay Cutler goes to the Jets. And the Texans, to me, I feel like they're gonna draft a quarterback, and they're gonna see if the rookie quarterback can win the spot, or if Tom Savage is gonna play. And they've said that they're okay with starting Tom Savage. They obviously wanted Tony Romo, but not gonna get him now. And the Broncos, like you said, they actually never said publicly that they had any interest in Tony Romo, ever. They've never said it.
I think that was more fabricated through the public than it was from the team.
Exactly. So I feel like this affects the Texans the most. I just never really saw Tony Romo going to the Jets. It just didn't really make sense to me. So I do think it affects the Texans the most. But like I said, I think they have a few different options. Maybe they won't win as soon as they'd like to with those options, but who knows? Maybe the rookie quarterback they draft, if they draft one, turns out to be a Dak Prescott. I mean, he could.
I have a couple thoughts on the Jay Cutler situation here. I think that's where I'm kind of transitioning this conversation to now, because I'm kind of fascinated by this. Now, imagine this scenario. Imagine a month ago, Brandon Marshall still on the Jets, and now Jay Cutler signs there, and they have Matt Forte, Brandon Marshall, and Jay Cutler. You basically have like the Chicago Jets playing up in New York. So I think that scenario would have been pretty interesting. I think he would get more money from the Jets than the Texans, but here's what I would do if I'm Jay Cutler. In my opinion, signing to the Jets is basically just throwing away any chance you want to win soon. If I'm Jay Cutler, here's my scenario if I want money. I will tell the Texans I will play for you for an average quarterback salary. I think that's pretty fair for 1 or 2 years, because I think the Texans have a team that with even Jay Cutler, they could really make some noise in the AFC. I would bet on myself to be successful and to try and stay healthy. If I'm Jay Cutler, I would bet on myself saying that if I go to the Texans, we can win a lot of games. And if we win a lot of games with me at quarterback, maybe the next deal 1 or 2 years from now, I can get the money I want now. I think that's what I would do if I'm Jay Cutler. I think if you go to the Jets, you're throwing away any opportunity to actually get big money for the rest of your career.
That makes sense, but Jay Cutler, from my experience with Jay Cutler, and I've had a lot because he was originally a Bronco, and then he was a Bear, where, I mean, I'm from that Chicago area. That's not who he is. He's not the guy who's going to say, okay,
I
I'm
said
take
if
a pay
I'm
cut.
Jay Cutler, I'm not trying to get into Jay Cutler's mind by any means. I think that's a pretty difficult thing to do. That's just what I would consider doing if I'm him.
That's understandable. I mean, I would do that too. It just makes sense to go to the Texans, who have a good team around them. They just need a quarterback. So if you go there, you have a good chance to win. And I think Jay Cutler, honestly, is a good quarterback. He throws a lot of interceptions, but I think he's a good quarterback.
And I also think he's a better leader than people give him credit for. From anything I've heard coming from Chicago, I think people talked about him as a pretty good leader, more so than we ever gave credit. I think we all said that he looks lackadaisical, he looks lazy, like he doesn't care. And I just think that's just the way he kind of comes off, but I don't think that's actually who he is as a player.
No, I don't think so. He does. I wouldn't really say he's a great leader, just because watching his games when they're they're not doing so hot, you can see when they cut to him on the sideline, he's not really into it. But I mean, I don't know. He's a veteran for sure now, so that veteran presence always helps. But again, I don't know. I just don't think he's going to take a pay cut, even though it's a smart thing to do to go to the Texans and win possibly a championship. I just don't see it happening.
You know, I was just thinking about this while I'm sitting here. You know who I really like for the Texans? I'd like them to get Patrick Mahomes. I really think that'd be an interesting fit. One, he's from Texas. He played at Texas Tech. Kind of can stay in his home state. I think the second reason I'm interested in that is, even as a rookie, if he was forced to play, which I definitely don't think he'd be ready to play as a rookie, he has a really big arm. That's kind of what he's known for. He's a pretty big gunslinger. You put him on a team with DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller, and Braxton Miller, and you might accidentally run into some success. He might make a lot of mistakes, and Brock Osweiler made his mistakes, but I think he'd be a little bit more willing to take those shots that Brock wasn't taking and he plays with a lot of swagger, and I just think that's what that Texans team needs. Brock Osweiler had no swagger about him. If you ever watched Texans games last year, DeAndre Hopkins disappeared, and it wasn't because he couldn't get open. It's because he never was thrown the ball. I don't think Brock trusted him enough to give him the ball. He wanted to play it safe and not make mistakes. I think he was getting ridiculed by everybody, and he just didn't give his best player enough opportunities, and I think with a guy like Patrick Mahomes, that's not going to be a problem. Patrick Mahomes would rather have 8 negative plays than 1 big one if it means he can get that 1 big one. And I think he'd be an interesting fit with that team. And another reason I'm also just bringing his name up is because I definitely think of the quarterbacks available, he will be available when the Texans are picking late in the first round.
Do you think they'll take Patrick Mahomes first round?
I don't know. I don't know if he would be available in the second for them to pick him. I also don't know if the Texans have a pressing need if they don't sign any quarterback going into the draft, more so than the quarterback position, that would actually warrant picking in the first round. This is a pretty deep draft at a lot of positions, and quarterback's not one of them.
That actually makes a lot of sense. I honestly would have never thought of that.
I was just thinking about it over here during the break and while we were talking a little bit. Just kind of something I came up with. So Patrick Mahomes to the Texans. We'll see what happens in my mock draft when we get to that week. I'm just going to throw it out there now. That might be the pick. But we're actually going to go to break real quick. And when we come back, we'll talk about our mock draft. We're going to talk about the 6th through 10th pick in the 2017 NFL draft. So stay tuned and we will be right back.